they end up doing films that are set within the original trilogy, which is certainly a possibility. This movie is going to be the one that is closest in time of the timeline of the Star Wars universe galaxy to the original A New Hope. I mean, this movie is supposed to take place leading directly into A New Hope, and so it's happening, right in the same, days and weeks and months of what we end up seeing in Star Wars A New Hope, and that in and of itself is unique. It's almost as if you're never going to get this close as a film to the original, unless you end up doing another movie that starts the moment or right after A New Hope ends. But as it stands right now, this movie is, again, it's going to sit. We'll probably never sit this close to A New Hope, and so that in and of itself is just awesome to me. I mean, the appeal of having, if you're looking at period films, right? And in terms of these being period movies, the fact that we're going to be right in the same period time frame of A New Hope, that's enough to get any Star Wars fan excited. But to add in this other element of, we're going to get some backstory on the Force and not so much the Jedi, but sort of the spiritual aspect of the Force. And that was, and again, that was something that made A New Hope so special. The Force was there, but it wasn't as in your face and on the nose as it was in the prequel trilogy. I watched Revenge of the Sith last night, and the scenes where they're sitting down and talking about the Force, where Luke is consulting with Yoda, those in those films, the Force was a little bit more outspoken, a little bit more sort of a living entity among these Jedi who were using the Force. The original trilogy, the Jedis were more like superheroes. In the prequel trilogy, the Jedis were more like superheroes, where in the original trilogy, the Force was something that was unique and special, and to be able to utilize it was something of difficulty. Luke trying to pull the saber out of the snow, trying to levitate the rock. These were things that were harder to do, where in the prequel trilogy, when the Jedi were, at their most powerful, they were doing all kinds of stuff without even thinking about it. Let's go ahead and let me play for you. We'll switch gears a little bit, but let me play for you the interview that Gareth Edwards did. And again, this was a couple of years ago. I think it was right after it was announced that he was going to be the director of Rogue One. This interview, it's just a little over 2 minutes long. It touched me in a way, and I'll explain when the interview is over, but it got me excited and made me a champion almost for Rogue One in a way that I did not expect. So let me go ahead again. This is Gareth Edwards, taken from the Star Wars show, an interview done with Lucasfilm a couple of years ago.
2 years ago, StarWars.com sat down with the Rogue One director to talk about what it was like growing up loving Star Wars, only to find out one day he would be living the dream and actually making Star Wars.
Enjoy.
Had it on Betamax, and one day my parents came home and they basically had this tape, and I put it in the machine and started playing it, but we had to go and have tea, and so I watched like 10 minutes of it, had tea as fast as I could, thinking, for the rest of my life, I'm just going to sit and watch that tape over and over and over and over. Like, I knew the rest of my life from that point on was just going to be sat with that tape. I did actually watch it a million times, and I could quote the film. My family was from Wales, and so we do these car rides to Wales, which would last about 90 minutes, and I did the whole script. Holding her is dangerous. If word of this gets out, it could generate sympathy for the rebellion in the Senate.
I have traced all the spies to her. Now she's my only link to find their secret base.
For my 30th birthday, my girlfriend said, "What are you going to do? You can have a party, And I was like, no. And so then it was, okay, well, is there somewhere you want to go away? And the only place I hadn't gone to that I've always been curious about was Tunisia. And we basically did this road trip where we went to all these different locations, like the canyon where R2-D2 falls over. And I spent the night in the Troglodyte Hotel, which is Luke Skywalker's home. And I actually took some blue dye with me so that in the morning I could have blue milk. And I spilt the milk. So there's a stain on the floor now that's blue in that room that I like to think I left my mark. And then drove across the desert to the other location, which is the igloo where the sun is setting. I shouldn't admit this, but I guess there's nothing anyone can do about it now. I took a few little bits from the sets.
Call security.
When I told my mum I did the FaceTime thing on my phone, and I was like, "Okay, Mum, so I've got another job. I'm going to tell you what it is. It's not what you think. It's Star Wars." And as she reacted, I went, and I've got this little picture on my phone of my mum reacting. I was expecting it to feel like a scary big burden, but it actually feels like, as strange as it sounds, it feels like returning home. I know this. This is what I grew up with. We all know what this has to be.
And say one nice thing about the Emperor.
Say one nice thing?
About the Emperor.
He hires a lot of British people, which is a very clever thing to do. Like, if I was building an empire and I wanted to win, I would hire a lot of British people.
That interview, I'm not gonna lie, really, it touched me. And I know that sounds weird, but I knew that Gareth Edwards was a fan, and I may have even watched that interview. They said it was the first time it aired, but I think I might have seen something that was similar to it back when he was announced. But it means so much to me as a Star Wars fan to think that a guy like Gareth Edwards, who's probably right around my age, is that into Star Wars, that he's that big of a fan. You know, I mean, that's what fans do. I was talking to my wife Melinda about it, and you know, I brought blue dye with me so that I could make the blue milk when I was sitting in the Lars homestead when I spent my birthday traveling to Tunisia to the old Star Wars sites. I mean, that's the stuff that Star Wars fans do. That's the level of our fandom and the experience that we want to have with this galaxy far, far away. And to know that this guy who's one of us is directing this movie, and a special movie at that. I mean, a movie that is something that most of us didn't really ever expect was going to happen, a spin-off film, a non-saga story. Thank you, Disney and Lucasfilm, for making these movies canon so that they fit in with all the other movies and they take part with the other films, even though they're not connected directly to, say, the saga films, apart from having Darth Vader in it. I mean, because that to me is awesome. Because as I said in one of the last podcasts, talking about whether or not they should have a crawl, you know, I could watch this movie and then immediately go and watch Star Wars: A New Hope, and they connect directly, right? But man, it's so cool that Gareth Edwards is that big of a fan and is able to go and do this movie. I mean, that just means a lot to me, and it has me rooting for him. It really does. And it also kind of puts me in a position where, you know, I'm willing to cut him slack depending on how the movie is, right? You know, these are essentially, and I heard somebody make this comment, and when you hear the comment, you kind of go, ugh, right? Ugh, that doesn't sound good. But what else could they be? The comment that they made was, these are essentially fan films. And you kind of go, ugh. I like some fan films, don't get me wrong, but fan films aren't exactly the kind of thing for me. Well, they're not the kind of thing for me that end up feeding my Star Wars fandom. They just don't do it for me, right? I like to have things that are directly connected to Disney and Lucasfilm that are official, even if they are expanded universe or legends now. However, when you think about what's going on with these movies, these are essentially, you know, really expensive Disney licensed, Lucasfilm created fan films. And they're always going to be, unless George Lucas goes and directs another one in the future. You know, these are going to end up being done if the people that are directing them are fans. You know, Rogue One is certainly going to be more of a fan film, if you will, just to use that. And again, there's a certain level of kind of disgust. That's probably too strong a word, but there's a certain level of, I don't want to do that comes with that. But you understand what I'm talking about. These are still Disney Lucasfilm movies. There's a lot of individuals involved in the storytelling and the creation of this and the story group. So, you know, you say fan film, and it's not the typical use of that term. But Gareth Edwards is a huge fan. And to me, that draws me in as a fan, knowing that a guy who's on almost on a level, if not or even a bigger fandom level, because I haven't gone to travel to any of these sites. I mean, I suppose I could if I saved up my money, and I would. But here's a guy who was on at least the same, if not a slightly higher level of fandom to the Star Wars universe, who gets to fulfill his dream. His job is to direct movies, and now he gets to direct a movie that he is the biggest fan of. I mean, how amazing is that? Look, it's part of the reason why I do this podcast. Let's just call it as it is. I do this podcast because I'm a professional talk show host. I'm a radio guy. I've been doing this for 20 years now, and I sit back and I do my show, and on weeks, especially like this last week and the week before that, I go, I'm so sick and tired of talking about the mainstream media news. This is just depressing. I just want to talk about Star Wars or, NASCAR or music or whatever. But in this case, I just want to talk about Star Wars. And I couldn't. Now I can. I do these podcasts for my love of Star Wars. To take what I do on a weekly basis and go and spend 45 minutes every weekend talking to you about my fandom and what's going on in the Star Wars universe. That's why I do it. So how great is it for Gareth Edwards that he gets to go and do this now? And that to me just brings a whole new level of joy and excitement and just rooting for this guy, knowing that this just must be amazing for him. I can't even imagine. It would be the only thing that I could equate it to is if I actually got a job where I got paid and I could support my family talking about Star Wars. That's the only thing that I could imagine. Oh, and trust me, I've kicked around the idea of, being the first one to dive in and do a daily Star Wars show. I wonder whether or not there is enough material or themes in there where you can do it. And I think you'd have to do some combination of entertainment movies and Star Wars with it overall. And doing a daily one, I just don't know how I'd make any sort of money on it. Believe me, I've thought about it probably more times than I should have. So I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did, and I hope that it provides you with another level and perspective over this film that we're going to get later this year. All right, so let's go to this celebration sizzle reel that we got.
May the Force be with us.
The music in it was really cool. Nobody's really been talking about whether or not the music in this sizzle reel is what we're going to hear in the movie itself. And it's interesting, too, because they didn't mention the score by, I think, Andrew Desplat, who is supposed to be doing the score for the movie, and he was the one who did Godzilla, and there was no mention of him over the weekend. And there was some rumored reports that there might have been some issues with him doing the score or something of this nature. So I thought that was interesting that they didn't talk about the soundtrack or the score at all. But the music in the sizzle reel was cool. It didn't. The difference between this celebration reel of the movie, this behind the scenes footage, and a trailer is the vibe that it conveys, right? Even with the first teaser trailer for Rogue One, there was a vibe that was conveyed there. They do a vibe, you get a vibe off of this celebration reel in these 3 minutes, but it's more of this is how we're making the movie, the process of making the movie, and what a battle that is, than it is of the movie itself. It certainly got me more excited seeing some of this footage. I want this movie. I can't wait to see this movie now. I'm really excited that the time that is spent being filled between The Force Awakens and Episode 8 next year, we're getting this type of movie shoved in here. That makes me really excited because there's going to be a lot to grab onto in terms of aesthetics, if you will, vehicles and planets and places. The saga films are characters and stories. Where are they heading? Where are they going? Where is the saga going to be heading? What's going to happen with Rey? Who's her parents? Where's Finn going? What's happening with Kylo Ren? Can he be redeemed? I mean, these are all the questions that end up hanging around the the saga films. With this movie, you're not going to have that as much. Beginning, middle, and end. And as a matter of fact, Felicity Jones during the Rogue One panel even made a comment that this is not a movie